Hi, everyone, and welcome once again to another dollop of the Self Detective Club. Another chance for us to potter around the garden of self-reflection. Another immersion into a safe space in hyperspace. And for what exactly? Well, hopefully for betterment. For those lovely eureka moments, for personal development, for wellness. But hey, however you want to interpret this platform is fine by me. The main thing is that you are most very welcome, and you can take whatever you want and leave the rest behind. We're calling this episode Body Talk because we're going to be talking about our bodies, and because generally speaking, we don't seem to talk all that much about our own somatic processes, at least not here in the UK. So can we dip our toes into these waters and gain greater levels of awareness, even if we don't have the time and willing to do anything with our own bodies just now? And by the way, you may have noticed that this episode is both parts 1 and 2 combined. This is because part 2, the chat with Louise, is the main feature. So there isn't much point in me prattling on when she knows about the body and I really don't. And besides, the wellness calendar for May is all about our own internal world. So that is kind of the main part 1 anyway. So all I'm really going to say before Louise joins us is, what do you make of this statement? The body expresses what the mind represses. The body expresses what the mind represses. Do you buy this idea? This idea that if we don't tend to our emotional hurts, our stresses, our traumatic life events, they will undoubtedly pop up somehow, somewhere, and they are likely to manifest themselves as physiological ailments. And I'm not just talking about muscle tension here, although, say, an achy jaw could be a good clue to an emotion that might benefit from being tended to. I'm also talking about our immune system, neurological disorders, intense bodily sensations, blood pressure, which is pretty much what Bessel van der Kolk is saying in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. We don't just keep memories of events, we also keep them at a cellular level. So yes, thinking about stuff is okay, talking about stuff is good, having feelings about stuff is good too. But this is all externalizing the internal, letting stuff go before they become entrenched in our bodies. But if tough stuff does make a home in our legs, arms, chest, buttocks, etc., then we can go into bodywork mode. Like, we can literally release this stuff through all sorts of interventions, through focusing on the part of us that could do with some self-care. And if you think that's a bit weird, a bit new agey, then I got some news for you. There's every chance you're doing a fair amount of body work already. Stretching your back, yawning, deep sighs. Yeah, what we are going to be talking about in part 2 is simply the next level, the more formalized level. Put awareness together with self-knowledge and self-care, and you've got yourself a neat little ecosystem. Okay, all good. And as usual, we have some links to more content in the show notes. And for correspondence, we have the email address podcast@selfdetective.net. So let's now fade out of one and fade into two. Louise, welcome.
Hi, Simon.
So you're here because you know a fair bit about the body, a lot more than I do, and I hope that we get a chance to explore the body because it would be useful to have a conversation about that in terms of well-being and wellness, and let's see what we can pick up along the way. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, if I'm not being too nosy, can I just start by asking how you kind of got into the body?
Okay. So I guess getting into the body was as a result of my lived experience of not being in the body. And when I started having kids, which was in my 30s, I had to get in my body because otherwise my kids were feral, and they weren't feeling contained, they weren't feeling safe. So, and up until that point, I hadn't actually realised that I wasn't in my body properly. I thought I was, the same as everybody else. But I had a lot of trauma and dissociation. So that kind of seemed to come up, particularly when I had started having children. So.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And if I could also share that I don't know a lot about the body, but you do. But I also had some experiences where when I was 13, stuff was going on for me, and I thought I was dying because it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And I went to a doctor and I said, I think I'm dying. And the doctor said, come back when you're 30 and you've got some real life problems.
Yeah.
And it was only when in my 20s when I was at a party and I was just chatting with someone and the conversation came up and I started saying all this weird stuff's going on with my body. And they put a name to it. They said, oh, this is panic attacks. And before then I didn't have a clue. I just thought,
oh my God, okay. Yeah.
So it was only when I got the words and I got a book and then I was like, Yeah. But even despite having all this sort of body somatic stuff, I still haven't gone into it the way that you have. So I'm guessing it's really nice that you've shared that introduction.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing there was something, are you saying almost that it was, you had to because you had this responsibility of children?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And what I noticed was that I basically just couldn't be present for them. And I was like, what is going on with this? I didn't understand it, and so I thought I needed to start working out why I felt like I was present sometimes and not others. And what I mean by present was that I was in the room, that I was kind of fully there, like I could, and I really, what I think happened was I had grown up in that state of being, so it was my normal. But then when you bring children into the world, or you have a partner, or you're working with people, it becomes challenging if you're not actually able to stay present for people because they kind of pick it up and they notice it. And with my kids, they would be a lot more chaos. They would be bickering and fighting more, and they would be wanting my attention more. And actually, they were a complete gift to me. My kids were kind of the beginning of my journey back into myself. And really primarily my first child. I had him when I was 31. So that was my first sort of stepping into my actual body, and that was through pregnancy and actually, not having caffeine, not, really keeping like a clean body at that point, no alcohol, no kind of ways of trying to feel or self-medicate my body before that. So
you were kind of left alone with your body and appreciating or being aware of the difference.
Yeah, I think so. I think I did. Yeah, I think I was like looking, I couldn't understand. Also, I found it very difficult to feel a lot of things. So people would be in joy and, happy about things. And I just felt like I was in like a real plain, like like a neutral zone. It wasn't happy, and sometimes it was sad, but I felt that I didn't get the range of emotions that everybody else seemed to get. And I got curious about that because I was working clinically then, and I was curious about the mind-body interaction, how the mind could interact with the body, and I wasn't trained in that work at all. So for me, it was a really kind of new experience. Yeah.
And again, just to ask, was that a curiosity just generally, like about the human condition, or was it a curiosity because you knew stuff about you in relation to other people, like that you knew maybe there was something different going on and you wanted to know about that for
I
you?
think, yeah, I think what I saw, I was working clinically as a fertility, I was working as an embryologist actually in a clinic, and I would see, patients go through their treatment and come to an end in their treatment where they hadn't had a successful outcome, they hadn't had a baby.
Yeah.
And they would go away, and then we'd get like a phone call about 3 months later, and they'd been like through treatment with us, and it hadn't worked. And then they would phone and say, actually, we're pregnant, we've got pregnant naturally. And I was like, how can that happen? And then it was just, I guess, learning about the impact of stress on the body, the impact of trauma on the body. So I became curious about that, basically. Yeah, and I was really lucky. I spent some time in Canada, and I got to meet some Indigenous people who are very in touch with somatics and energy of bodies, and they were really helpful with me, helping me sort of step kind of more into myself. I think that's the only word I can say. That's the way I can describe it, is that I sort of stepped fully into my feet in a way, and really started to take a breath in my body, and started to kind of land and feel like the weight of myself, which I'd never experienced before.
I'm getting this picture of like your curiosity as an energy, then being at the right place at the right time, or at least then you being open enough to be able to receive stuff from other people that possibly were willing to share because you were so keen, and that it was it felt like
Yeah, yeah. I was exploring, exploring things, exploring, why I'd had certain things, things happen in my life, why I found relationships difficult, which kind of pushed me into, becoming a sex and relationship therapist. Once I finished my career as an embryologist, I was really curious about that. Why some people find it easy, why some people find it really difficult, and all of the differences and how valid they all are, and some of them having different origins, some difficulties being kind of innate and because of us, because of our kind of neurodiversity, or because of the way we were brought up, or there are so many factors that can affect the ability of somebody to be present in the moment.
Yeah. And you mentioned about fertility, and you mentioned this one particular couple that were suddenly able to conceive naturally without any sort of intervention. Is that also something then that got you particularly interested in the body?
Yeah,
Or is that
I was
one
just
example?
interested in how, some things were things were beyond like medical, beyond the medical intervention, and how it was almost the relief of that couple stopping their treatment. And I think they went on a holiday. They were just like, oh, we'll just go away. And I think they got pregnant naturally on the holiday, which, of course, you can't prove, anything. Maybe some of the treatment they had stimulated some ovulation or something like that, or maybe relaxing and going and reducing stress levels, created a different environment for them, reducing stress. But yeah, at that point, I was like early, before, late 20s, 30s. I was like, oh, I'd always studied pathology, so which was always like the disease of tissues. So to sort of start engaging with this was really interesting for me. So it was really my mind's curiosity that kind of started me on the journey, I think.
And you allowed it to be. Like the opposite of curiosity, I guess, is judgmental. If you're from a pathological, sorry if I got the right word,
Yeah.
background, isn't it quite challenging to think that there's anything beyond that? Kind of like once you're in
Yeah,
a medical
yeah.
model, you can be
Oh,
kind of stuck.
yeah. When I first started thinking about things, I was like, and my Indigenous friends they were talking about energy, and I was like, oh, can't measure that, can't see it. You know, what is it? If it's not scientific, how am I supposed to allow my scientific mind to understand that? So, yeah. So,
So what happened? I'm like, is it okay to pry then? Well, how did you become open to this
I,
new stuff?
mm, I had a couple of things happen that were kind of too they couldn't have been sort of coincidence, and then what I realized was that everything, I started to realize that everything was connecting, and that we weren't little separate entities in our worlds. We were connected to things. So, like, I would go and study something, and then one of my kids would talk about it, and I was being like, how have they picked that up? And it's a bit like having, when you're on your phone and you're searching for something, and then, or you're talking to a friend about something, and then it starts prompting you. That's kind of, it was like that kind of stuff would start happening for me, but in like reality, in a reality. And so I actually, I did a couple of little kind of science sort of experiments myself, and then kind of established that, that my experience was actually what I was experiencing was actually real and could be measured. And then, yeah, and then that was it. Once I had that kind of my own personal evidence, I was like really trusting of myself moving forward.
And is it okay to talk about this moving forward? Like, so what did you discover that was outside of the science field? Can you remember sort of a little bit chronologically, like what was your first sort of discovery in?
I was, yeah, it was just, I don't know. I guess personally, it was like connection to, connection to things, connecting to trees, to the earth, really to the earth, probably is my main connection. And it would be like, how has the earth got the power to change how I'm feeling? How is it that when I put my feet on the earth, the way I'm feeling, the way I'm thinking completely changes? How can that be? And I started to explore that. I've always been very, very into nature and woods, and I'm a cold water dipper, and I'm a maker, so I make a lot of things with nature, in nature, and I was really interested in that nature had the power to have this magnetic force on my body that would help me regulate, actually, and go from a kind of activated stressed state into a regulated state, which I guess is probably what happened for that couple when they were on holiday. Maybe they were in the sea or something like that, or hiking, or you just don't know, do you? Yeah, so I think that was kind of, once I started experiencing that, it was for me, it was a lifesaver. It was such a lifesaver, because I kind of felt, oh, right, well, this is what this is what I'm here, this is what my body's for. Actually, I can experience myself in a completely different way than to the way I've experienced myself up to now. Does that make
Sounds
sense?
seismic. The way you said it sounds absolutely like complete life-changing moment.
Yeah,
What
I
life
think,
is without the body kind of not being present,
yeah,
and suddenly,
yeah.
boom.
Yeah, I think as well. I think I had a couple of moments, and again related to I was kind of solo parented for, like, for my three kids, and it was challenging at times. And I remember being really stressed. I think it was the summer holidays, and anybody who's got kids in the summer holidays knows how challenging that can be. And I think I was just like, oh, I need to get out. I just need to go for a walk to calm myself down and relax, and I just went through. I did a woodland circuit that I always do with my dog, but this time I was really stressed, really agitated, and did this circuit. And then by the end of the circuit, I was so much calmer, and I could, even though I was still it didn't change my circumstances, but I felt better in myself. And then I could, I was then able to, be present more for my kids. And it really is, how present can you be for the things that you're having to deal with? And, everybody's got a different architecture of their life. Everybody's got a different history. Nobody's got the same constellation of events that has happened to them. You haven't, I haven't, there's not one single client that comes in through my door where I'm the same as them. Everybody's completely different. Everybody's got, different experiences. And it's like, how does an individual manage those experiences within the architecture of their life and, I guess, thrive more than survive? Because obviously I think a lot of the time before I realized about all of this, I was just surviving my life, and doing trainings because I wanted to be able to offer, as a therapist, you do trainings to keep yourself up with what's happening, the developments that are happening and things like that. But I think the most important thing is that, that as a therapist, you find, you're continually developing yourself as an individual, because your ability to hold change and experience change with your clients is the, and be in relationship with your clients is the most important thing within the therapy, I think.
So you're using a lot of this stuff, this new knowledge professionally, but also then personally, and the professional was feeding the personal, and the personal.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think with embodiment work, what we're talking about, I don't think you can consciously. Yes, you can do a meditation to act, to bring yourself into a place of more presence. But I think if it's not your normal to be like present and really noticing everything that you're hearing, really looking at the colours that are around you, noticing the smells, noticing what your body feels like, and how you're, noticing yourself, the balance between your inside world and your outside world. If that's not your normal, then I've forgotten what I was going to say now.
Well, yeah, no, where do you go if this is not your normal? Like, I've written down quite a number of words that some people might not be aware of or sort of know too much, so maybe we can sort of work more with those. Present, regulating, embodiment, somatic.
Yeah.
So,
so what was my thread when I was?
Well, I think it was like, wow, there's two very different paths. There's
oh no, so I've got it back. Yeah. So I think that until we become like masters of our own presence, until we know ourselves, which I don't think many of us do, unless we've had to learn about ourselves, I think that, we can't consciously go, oh right, I'm going to be really present in my feet today because I've got a meeting, or I'm going to be really present I'm going to be really calm in my heart center, and I'm going to be really calm in this body, my meat body that is carrying me. I'm not going to be able to, I'm going to be really calm with that because I've got this exam today. It doesn't happen, does it? It's like your body does what it's been trained to do, or what's been conditioned to do by by what's happened, by your constellation of experiences that has happened previously. And I think, I'm really loving the kind of image of the constellation, because how complicated a constellation is. If you look up at the sky, it's a constellation is so complicated, and you can't go, well, that linked to that, and that happened then, and then that happened, then that star imploded, and that, you just can't do that. It's like it's impossible to know what came first, what didn't come first, why this happened, why we decided to close off one of our senses more than another sense. We just don't know why we do those kind of things, because they usually happen, gradually and accumulatively throughout life.
So where do we go with all of this then? If we can't just switch it on and off because there's an exam or a meeting, what are you saying here? What can we do?
Well, I think we can work with us. We can get to know ourselves, and and I think the best thing that we can do is use our bodies to be really present. Now, for somebody who, who's had a really technically, good life, and they haven't really had any massive traumas, but and they're comfortable. They're not stressed all the time. They may go, oh right, well all I need to do is I just need to take some breaths into my body, and I'm there. I'm good for that meeting. I know I've got enough knowledge about myself, enough evidence about myself to know that I'm gonna go through that meeting and do it well, or I'm gonna go and have I'm gonna have an interview, and I'm gonna be a good candidate for that job. I mean, I don't meet many people like that, but that I think there are those people, and I'm not stereotyping, or but then you've got people who've had things happen, that they may or may not realize. It could be something like the birth of a sibling. It could be moving house when it could be leaving your granny or something like that. It could be a parent getting ill. It could be a divorce. It could be anything. It could be anything. It could be an unexpected accident or something like that. We get traumas, and we get little traumas and big traumas throughout our lives, and a lot of things happening before sort of the age of 5, before our brains fully developed. We won't even remember what those things are. We might have a somatic memory. When I say a somatic memory, we might have like the smell of a cake, or some music, or texture of a carpet, or something that we might remember, but we might not have the little movie or the image of something. And some people don't see images anyway. Yeah. So we may not remember. We may just have a sensation or a feeling in our body that might push us away from something or take us towards something.
Yeah.
And I guess the best thing, for me, that I've found, and what I see with my clients, the best thing I can teach them, when we are focusing on a psychoeducative part of therapy, is like how to get as present in their bodies as they can be. Obviously, so that they can become aware of themselves, and then once they start to experience how present they're being or how present they're not being, then there tends to be like a new awareness that grows, and then they get more awareness as like, oh right, okay, I can feel myself kind of, like you said with your panic attacks, it's like there was probably a lot of symptoms that started with that accumulated and grew together and became a bigger constellation than they were to start with. And so when you start to feel the little triggers, the beginnings of those, you start to go, oh right, okay, I can really feel I'm getting anxious here, so I'm gonna sort of work with myself to get more present. And we would do that through breath work, and feeling your feet on the floor, using your senses around yourself to get present into the present moment.
And it sounds great. And my little 13-year-old self, the panic attacks continued up until 30, would have loved all of that. But instead, what I was doing was making myself worse by finding dysfunctional coping strategies around not going to places, leaving places early, and also just making things worse by catastrophizing and convincing myself that this was, but psychosomatically making myself ill, because I didn't have any of the tools whatsoever.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is you had a part of yourself that was protective and was going, I think you're going to have, this Simon part thinks that you're going to have a panic attack, or you're going to get triggered in this situation, so let's not go to that.
Yeah.
And so it's an avoidance strategy. So it's a protective strategy, but it's avoidant. And then what happens is it then gets big, kind of, it's like a dust ball. It grows and grows and grows and grows and then gets bigger, and then you end up, you can end up being, I guess, avoidant of not just that experience, but avoidant of going to the shops as well, and avoidant of going and meeting your friends who would actually be really good for you, or avoidant of going to a gig that you really thought, of a gig of a group that you really like, or so that part of you that was going, let's not do that. It's that was a part of you that was, probably in the beginning really worked well, and looked after you. But actually, as life went on and other things attached, other things accumulated within that situation, it became too big for that part of you to manage.
Yeah. And what a shame now that I'm getting more comfortable with my body, being the word.
Yeah.
But what a shame that I could have had this experience. Lots of people out there could have experiences where they're at one with their bodies, and their bodies are as much a part of their well-being as anything else, because they're using their senses for pleasure, all of this kind of stuff. Instead of what I was doing was not trusting my body. So being very much in my head and looking for signs that my body wasn't working. Well, flip that around, body's working great, like it's keeping me alive, and it's doing amazing stuff.
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to actually touch on a little bit, because I've obviously mentioned dissociation, and dissociation used to be considered like a really negative thing, but actually, what your brain is doing is say you're like 10 years old and you've got a situation going on and your brain just cannot cope with it. What you will do is you'll kind of, there'll be a dissociation, there'll be a kind of forgetting or an erasing of that memory so that you can't access it. So although you're in the situation, you won't remember that situation. It'll be a dissociation. You kind of split into a part, you split. So it'll be that, it'll be Joe who can't cope with that situation will not even realize that he hasn't coped with that situation. And actually what that is, that's the brain being really giving a creative response to something that it just cannot process. Our brains are, adaptive, they're like computers, they're processing, and what they're doing is they're kind of, the cogs are working and they are going, okay, so you felt a little, you felt a bit upset about that thing. We're going to just process that, and our brain's going to work with us, and it's going to allow us to feel the upset, and then there'll be a recovery. But actually, what happens is, if the brain doesn't recover from that incident or that distress, and a different distress happens the next day, then that gets added into the computer program. And like if you've got too many windows open on your computer and it just freezes, that's kind of what happens with the brain. And then what happens is we get stuck in a trauma response. And the trauma responses, they are, fight, flight, freeze, placate, and placation, is just kind of fawning with someone to make sure that you're safe, for example. And so there's an accumulation, and what happens is you stay in that position. So you become the person who is either in fight, flight, freeze, or placate. And you're not, and what that means is that you're not actually functioning in your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that, where we learn and, can understand things, go, oh, right, okay, this is what's happening. Instead, what happens is we go, with the panic attacks, you're probably completely in your limbic brain, which is your trauma brain, and you weren't able to use your prefrontal cortex, you weren't able to access your prefrontal cortex to think and to reason your way out of what was happening, because there were too many things happening. So our brains are like amazing, and I think there's much less intention to pathologize a dissociation event and see it really as a positive event.
This is great. So, thank you very much for taking the time.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, to take the time to explain. Is it okay as well if I share a little bit and then you can politely tell me because I do sometimes oversimplify stuff. So I've got this idea that we've got this human brain that's absolutely amazing, and then but we've got a mammal brain, and then we've got a reptile brain.
Yeah.
And that if we're in the trauma response, if we've been triggered,
Yeah.
with there's no hanging around, so there's no human brain because that's a luxury. That's like the rational. So there's like automatic stuff that a split second you're not even going to be able to
I
choose.
think it's 0.3 of a second. Yeah.
0.3 of a
That will
second.
have. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're either going to do fight, freeze, and then there's a few others in there, flop and friend.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Five
Yeah.
Fs. Almost automatically on what kept you alive last time.
Yeah.
Because the body's just there for survival in terms. Well, the human brain is a bit more than that, but the rest. So is that sounding okay?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds. Yeah, that
And
sounds.
am I right to think that this theory, called the polyvagal theory, is absolutely extraordinary in the sense that it helps to link the body and mind together, like, rather than have them as two separate things. There's now a theory that says there's this nerve that goes into our. Well, anyway, I will stop talking because I will just stumble. But are you able to say a bit more about this polyvagal theory, which expands on what you?
Yeah, the polyvagal. Yeah, what it does is it basically is the way that the body knows if it feels safe or not. So, for example, and it starts from the head and the ears, and it goes down all the way through your systems, all the way through your organs, down to genitals, and in women it's vaginal walls, men it's perineum. So it's like, you'll have to fact check that, yeah. I'm pretty. This is how I see it, anyway.
Yeah, but it's a huge nerve, then.
So it's a whole nerve complex, okay. Yeah. And so what it does is it kind of gives feedback. It's got like a system going up and a system going down. Yeah. I'm trying to say it as, and what it does is it tells you it tells you whether your body's actually safe or not. Okay, and some of the way that it does that is by looking at somebody. So like, you're looking at me, and if I'm smiling and I'm warm and I'm connecting with you, and so we can have this chat, and it's going to be easy and a bit of and kind of fun for us, and we're just connecting, aren't we? Whereas if I was like not looking at you, and I wasn't smiling, and I was really sort of serious, and you kind of felt threatened by how I'm talking to you now. I've changed my voice.
Yeah.
So Simon, if we get this wrong, this could be really dangerous for us. Our careers will be on the line. That kind of stuff. Then, it completely changes the energy, and so you immediately. I don't know what you noticed. What did you notice in your body when I changed how I was being with you?
Yeah, not nice. Suddenly, you're looking a bit shifty, so I'm feeling a bit shifty.
Right. So you're mirroring me a bit. Okay.
I'm being a bit like offish now. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've shut down. You've closed down a little bit. And do you feel a contraction in your body, or?
Oh, if I was more aware, I might be.
Yeah.
But I've just. I'm kind of notice a little bit of nervous laughter, like, come on, please, I want Louise back.
Okay, so let's do a little thing to get your body feeling safe. Just take your fingers and just put them behind your ears, and you'll just feel, just do a little massage behind there, and you might feel some saliva going into your mouth.
Yep.
And then just noticing your body. How are you feeling when you're doing that? Your body is it relaxing? Yeah, it's relaxing now. Yeah, so what you're doing is you're actually kind of massaging, that's it's polyvagal, that's what you're working with there. Yeah.
Great. So the polyvagal is as much about friend being
absolutely,
knowing if I can trust you or not for my own survival stuff. And if you're smiling, I'm good with the world.
Yeah, unless I'm a psychopath or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's always caveats, but yeah. Yeah,
there's always caveats. But the other thing as well is, we just did something with our ears, didn't we? But actually, your whole body is a sensing a sensing organ. Okay. And if you heard that saying about your gut instinct,
Yes.
and also we know each other, we know that we're doing this for like a demonstration, but if you hadn't met me from Adam and I've got to interview this woman on polyvagal system, or I'm interviewing this woman, then you probably wouldn't have that kind of history with me, so you wouldn't know that we were just being playful or whatever. But the other thing, so you've got your gut instinct, and that's what I kind of mentioned briefly. I sort of said, did you feel open or did you feel contracted? And that kind of, for me, in my experience, that tends to be around the gut, my solar plexus of my body, which is probably around the belly button, and above the pelvis. That's where I feel a contraction.
Okay.
If I'm kind of like anxious about something. Okay. And then the other thing that I would notice as well, or you may notice, is a change in your breathing pattern. Because our breath in the breath in the body, breath is your life force. And so what you might have done was you might have held your breath when I started, being a bit more, unpredictable, and so what you're doing is you're kind of putting your body on hold a little bit. So one of the things that I work with clients is, whereabouts are they breathing? Can they take a belly breath? Or are they breathing in their upper chest, or sometimes even like just, is it like just a very short, depth breath, in their bodies, or are they actually able to take a breath down into the belly? And, does their body soften with that breath, or does it stay contracted? And then the more comfortable you get with taking those breaths and being, taking your breath fully in your body, then and softening your body with your breath, then you can really soften your whole body. You can soften your pelvis, you can soften, and you can almost, I don't know how to describe it, it's almost like there's a conscious breath. There's the breath that's physical in your body and going into your lungs and your belly, and then there's the breath that you can feel going kind of up and down with that. And I think that's my experience of being fully in my body breathing, is that I can feel my breath in my whole system, rather than just not being aware of it at all, really. So it's kind of a conscious breath, I would say.
Yeah, thank you for all of this. You what I'm picking up from this is kind of like just how many layers or how many stages there can be in terms of body awareness, and going back to this word, sort of regulation, like, and how much we can self-regulate ourselves.
Yeah, I think depending on the trauma that we've had, and depending on our awareness, depending on who we're working with, in terms of our therapist or our group of people supporting us or our family, it's like we all have a different experience with our own somatics, with our own bodies. And I can't say, okay, Simon, if you do this, this and this, you're going to feel really good, okay? Because you might go, actually, that's the worst thing I want to do. I really don't want to do that. Like if I said to friends, I'm a cold water dipper, which I really find helps me with my embodiment. It makes it, I really value that as a resource for helping me. But so many people do not, they just won't, they don't want to go in cold water. Why would you want to go in cold water? For me, it works. For other people, it doesn't work. So, what can you do? There are, walking in nature, just sitting down, breathing, meditating is always helpful. But there are some people who find it difficult to meditate, where you close your eyes and you go into that Zen mode, because if they've had trauma or they're more dysregulated, then they might find that is actually not helpful for them, because it can sort of mimic a kind of trauma response, and what they actually need is an active meditation. And Gabor Mate talks about active meditations, and Bessel van der Kolk, the big kind of guys that, the people that are doing a lot of the trauma work, really really kind of at the forefront of helping people learn how to regulate and understand themselves. And I think it's Bessel van der Kolk. He talks about the body keeps the score. How the body can hold trauma from when you were like 3. If you weren't given the space and the appropriate holding for you to process that trauma. or that distress, so our body, if you think about it, if we think about the architecture of our bodies and the constellation of all the things and our experiences that have happened to us, our body's kind of holding it all as a map, and so nobody's got the same map. So you've got to kind of, I guess we have to kind of learn about ourselves,
Can I share some things that I've picked up on my journey, and then just respond to them, however, add to them or correct me if I'm leading anyone down a merry path. So I've heard of something called orienting, which is an idea that if you are at a computer too long and you're not just moving your eyes around, there's a part of your body that's going to be, I'm not comfortable with this because there might be someone behind me. And until you let the body know there is nobody or no threats, then the body might just crank up a little bit of alert. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's kind of like just literally move around every so often, because if you're locked in one place for too long, the body's going to get a bit aggy. So it's just like, move around. So that was one thing I liked. Another thing was Iris Murdoch wrote something about unselfing. And she said that a lot of people just need to escape themselves because being in the body is really intense. Being in the mind is really intense. And she said that some people just go to alcohol to unself themselves.
Self-medicate.
It's a real quick one, or sort of like meditation, whatever. But she said that there was something amazing about being in nature, and she used a description of a bird of prey, that it's so amazing, that it's so majestic, that it's so like takes your breath away, that you lose yourself because you're not that important in the scheme of things, or there's something else that's just like, oh wow. So I love that idea of unself, as in you can go somewhere that's just gives you a brief moment away from yourself, because gosh, we're like full on all the time. That was a couple of things, and then epigenetics, but I'm not comfortable enough saying stuff. But there is a book called "It Doesn't Start With You." This is
Mark Bullion.
Bodily trauma can be passed down from generation to generation.
There's transgenerational trauma that definitely goes through the DNA. But I think what you're talking about with the epigenetics is the sort of micro changes, protein changes, and how you can change an environment. Growing. If you put, growing people developing in a certain environment, they're going to be different to the same as identical as you can. Growing in a different, growing up in a different environment. So they can be same age, same gender, same whatever, but you'll have differences. And I think what they're talking, they talk a lot now about epigenetics. I'm not a geneticist,
do you have any takeouts? Do you have any takeouts of any of this stuff for yourself that keeping?
I think epigenetics. I think they've shown, and I'd have to fact check myself on this, but I think what I've heard is that sitting in a circle of peers, talking about something that you've all experienced is more beneficial than you going to a doctor that hasn't experienced hasn't experienced the same thing you had. And then I think what it is that, and that, I'm not saying that a doctor isn't essential, because doctors are essential, but what I'm saying is that for that specific incidence, then it's by sitting with a peer group, by sitting maybe in circle, by sharing your experience, by interacting and connecting with people that have the same experience, you are changing what's happened to you. You're changing the epigenetics of what's happened to you. That's how I interpret it. So
that sounds wild.
Yeah,
I love group work, and I'm wondering.
Yeah, well, I think that is what happens. You've heard of the group mind, haven't you? So the group mind, when the group mind works, so why shouldn't the group body work? And if you think about it, we did a thing when we were doing the, when I was being like harsh, whatever. You said, oh, I'm feeling a bit, you said I'm feeling like a bit back. You were mirroring me, and that's the thing, because our brains have got. They've got mirror neurons in, and so that's how we learn as children. We learn by copying, but obviously if we're not copying the right thing, then it can be unhelpful. And then so we've got transgenerational trauma, we've got intergenerational trauma as well. So we've got, and if you look, there's so much going on in the world at the moment, so many, things that are beyond our control. It's like I don't have any doubt whatsoever that there's extra trauma, there's the existential trauma happening as well. So we've got to learn, how do we stay present to all that? How do we stay present in a climate that really doesn't suit our morals, doesn't suit our ethics, doesn't suit how we want to live? We have to find ways to stay present to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, and do you have an answer or some answers, suggestions to that? How do we?
I mean, everybody's different. Everybody does it a different way. For me, in my world, the things that I experience currently are so unpredictable. Like, if you think about even like our government changing and rules changing all the time, goalposts changing all the time, we have no control over that. Okay, so the way I can work with that with myself is I have like this, I kind of see myself as a human gyroscope. Okay, so my energies and things like that are always moving because I'm interested in that. So I know about that, and everything's always changing, nothing's staying the same, but it's always evolving, hopefully in a positive way. So I have, with my gyroscope, so I have like what's above me is always there, like the universe, the stars, all of that's always there. And what's below me is the earth, which is it's called a chthonic practice. It's a really strange word, but I love it. It's chthonic. Chthonic, it's of the earth. So the practice for me, my practice is to recognize that connection, which kind of goes straight through me. So it'd be like a gyroscope, and like if you spin a gyroscope, and then what else holds me is the directions, the north, east, southwest, they hold me as well. So I've got my orientation, I'm standing upright, I've got my orientation, and I know where I'm moving and I know what I'm connected to. So that's my kind of gyroscope. That's kind of how I orientate myself. And so that's what I can rely on.
Yeah. I love it. Is this a world exclusive? Have you mentioned the human gyroscope before?
I've been blathering on about it a little bit to like my supervisor and things like that, but and some friends, but that's kind of, for me, that's what it is. That's how I orientate myself.
It seems very relatable.
And if you think about the displaced people that we have in our communities at the moment, they can't rely on even being in their home country. They've had to move, for safety reasons, to get away from wars, to protect their families. And so they've had to leave houses behind, they've had to leave friends, family, pets, gardens, they've had to leave their lives behind. So what do they bring with them? They can't carry all of that with them. So what they bring is their human compass. And then they're all kind of, then they can relate to, the people that they're bringing, and, they have to come and start again. So how do you stay present to that? It's really difficult. So
the human gyroscope.
Yeah, I think it works. Yeah, the gyroscope. Yeah, I think it does work. And and we don't know what's going to be happening in our worlds, do we? With climate change, and worlds never stay the same. Our lives never stay the same. They're constantly changing. That's but that's the old principles of the book. Nothing stays the same.
Yeah.
That's been for thousands of centuries, hasn't it? It's like thousands and thousands of years. People have been, the Buddhists, the spiritual teachers, say nothing stays the same, and it doesn't. But what does stay the same is where you have your feet on the floor and what's above you.
Yeah, I love it, because it can apply to anyone. Because that's, as long as we've got the stuff above us and below us.
Yeah.
Orienting the magnetic fields, then.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you're leaning over because you're your compass is you're changing, but you know.
Good. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
You mentioned the word regulation before.
Mm.
I've recently stumbled across the idea of co-regulation.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I like group work so much, that in a
Yeah.
really healthy, going for it group that's really safe and functional, and then I get that co-regulation. And by that I mean that even if I'm a little bit dysregulated myself and
Yeah.
out of sorts with my body, not feeling it, then I feel like I can go to a group and it will it will reduce my heart rate, it will,
Yeah.
and I will come out feeling revived, refreshed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really into this idea of co-regulation, and for people to be aware of the people that can do it to them, but also the opposite, to try and avoid the people that are dysregulating you just by their chaos, or their anger, or their oppressiveness. Like, if we could be aware of that, then maybe we can do a lot of self-regulation through ourselves, but also through the knowledge of co-regulation. Is there any more to say about that?
I think that is well, obviously we talked earlier about that fight, flight, freeze. You know, the 5 Fs that you talked about. If your brain is in that state of being, then any group that you're going to go into is going to be, of some kind of, there's going to be some kind of response, whether it's a good, whether it's regulating or further dysregulating. So I think it is, I think that's what, with ground, you do grounding techniques, don't you, with a group to start with, so that everybody is as in their prefrontal cortex as they can be, and then it's a safer connection, because if you can kind of feel when somebody's not. If you've had experiences where you've been around people who have been in fight or flight, think about, somebody arguing with somebody on a train or something like that, you immediately want to move away from it. You want to protect yourself. So I guess there'll be some groups whereby, you're going into that and you are triggered by something. So if you've got the skills to go into your if you can be in your prefrontal cortex through the grounding techniques, if you can stay, then you can sit with that. You can go, okay, this feels uncomfortable, but I'm not unsafe. Okay, so this maybe reminds me of something else that happened when I was 12, or, something that happened when I was 23, or something happened when I went for a job one time, And so actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit with this, and I'm going to see what my body does with this, and I'm going to see whether I can ground myself through this, and what can I learn from that person. And then you might find that person who's really aggy or trigger in the group has had a really, really bad, something really negative happen, and hasn't got any support at home, so they've brought it to the group, and then what happens is we co-regulate each other. And I think what happens in a group, this is what I see in my mind's eye, I see like the weaving of a container. I see a container being woven by the connection with the group, and then that becomes a safe container for people to bring things that they wouldn't necessarily bring. And that's, as you know, as a facilitator of groups, then you can have great sharings, and you can come out of a group feeling really, really positive, really nurtured, really held, really regulated. And that's what we're talking about, and that happens within couples as well. Where couples are co-regulating each other. And also I heard a term that my daughter shared with me actually the other day. She talks about body doubling, and I guess I think she's very interested in how we are with in certainly in neurodiversity, and I think it's a term used with neurodiversity, basically body doubling, but I hadn't really heard it before, and I thought actually it makes sense that when you're with somebody who's really proactive, you're going to kind of be proactive with them. So rather than you take all the proactivity and then they lose their proactivity, I think it's a way of like mirroring and anchoring. So if you've got somebody who's very anchored, and who's very connected, then I think you're more likely to help that other person be anchored, if that makes sense.
Great. Yeah, I'm gonna look this up.
Yeah, I don't really know enough about it, but I thought it was a really interesting concept.
So I'm going to do some show notes, as I think they're called. Like I'll do links to things
Mm.
around some of the stuff that we've spoken about. We've been at this almost an hour now,
Yeah, I
Louise,
know.
and I'm just
It's gone
wondering,
very
like,
quick.
do you have a sense of how much um, we've gone into and how much might still remain? Like, we haven't spoken so much about the senses, but we
Mm.
touched upon it. But where are you at? You being much more body orientated than
Oh,
me.
there's something that it's probably one of the first things I do with my clients. Okay,
Mhm.
and because clients usually come, they're not coming to trauma, to therapy because they're happy. They're coming because they're distressed about something, and obviously you're
Yeah,
holding space for that distress, and
yeah.
masks can drop, and so how, probably the first point of self-regulation that I would work with is I would just do a small, like a meditation. Provided we've got hands, and we can just take our hands and we can just put it on the chest,
Hmm.
middle of the chest, and
Hmm.
then you could probably use both hands to start with, and I would just sit at this point, and I would just invite you just to notice the weight of your hands on your body and the temperature of your hands on your body. So as you sit, you'll start to notice, unless you're very, very numb, you'll sit and you'll start to notice that you've got your hands on your body, and that's a proprioceptive thing, but it's also doing some other things to your brain. But so I'm just wondering what you're noticing when you're doing that, Simon.
Mm. I I love this. I have to say, this is one of the few go-tos. I call
Yeah,
it the butterfly. Um,
yeah,
Instantly soothing, calming, much the same as if I was to put my
yeah,
palm
yeah,
onto my
yeah. That's
side
right.
of my face. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, staying with this, um,
yeah.
feel like my body's contained, or at least sort of like the chest area is,
Mm, mm.
um, which feels good.
Yeah. So you feel good.
Yeah.
And what's happening with your breath while you're doing this?
Yeah. A nice, slow, purposeful breath.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what do you notice about your feet when you're doing this?
Ooh. Now you're asking.
Yeah,
Not a lot. Just now that you mention them, I'm not
yeah,
aware that that my little toes are touching the ground.
yeah. Great, great. So you're feeling the ground.
Hmm.
Okay. So what's happening when you're stimulating your chest like this is you're stimulating oxytocin in your brain, which is the cuddle hormone. So you're basically giving yourself a hug in this moment. And the cuddle hormone is what helps to bond. So if you think about it, you're bonding with yourself right now.
Yeah, nice.
And so, which is what we've been talking about, it's like, the connection to yourself. Like, how do you, if you are that whirling dervish, person who's, you know, struggling or a bit dysregulated, how do you connect to anybody? If you can't connect to anybody outside you, then can you connect to yourself? And then this I think this is probably the most important connection that we can work on, is the connection to ourselves.
Yeah.
And then what that does, it takes away the needs of other people to regulate us,
Mm.
which puts us into an adult place.
Could we call this self-soothing?
Yeah,
That be,
definitely. It's a
yeah.
self-soothe. Yeah, it is definitely a self-soothe.
Because it's only recently, as someone who's kind of um, is kind of male, so
Mm, mm,
that kind of sees themselves as male, though sometimes questions it. Um,
mm,
that a lot of the advertisements and whatnots were around sort of using moisturizer and stuff, something that females did. Like
mm.
that was the message, so I never did it. And it's only really recently that I've started putting like cream on my skin, and it's such a lovely, soothing thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, man, I could have been doing this like
yeah, yeah. And so,
in my
yeah,
teens onwards, and it's like,
it's that's another resource that I do, because obviously when you're putting a cream on, you're touching yourself, and you're basically giving your body, you're reminding your brain where your body is, which is a great thing.
yeah.
And
And it being okay to touch the
yeah,
body as opposed to
yeah,
sort of being alienated from it because I
yeah,
was in my mind.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you put something in that you smell, so I don't know what smells you like, but if you like, say, lemon, or you like cedar, and cedar can be a very earthing smell, then you're going to stimulate that sense when you're putting on. So your touch, you're doing two of your senses straight away. You're doing, you're doing smell and touch, and then that's a very good resource.
I got some essential oils for Christmas, and one of them I had an immediate bond with, and I can't get enough of. And it's oak. It's something oak, but it's oak. Like, just wouldn't have thought that I would have been enthralled by a nice oaky aroma.
Yeah. Have you ever, I mean, obviously you know what an oak tree looks like, and you know how big how big they are.
I think I know where this is going already. Not yet, but that's a great idea. Of course, yeah.
No, but so you know how big they are, but just think about the roots that
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
the roots that the oak has. It's like 2/3 of the roots. If you look at the size of an oak, it's 2/3 of its size is underground, anchoring it. Okay, and there's all sorts of information now about trees that have got connected, that their roots are connected in mycelial systems, and there's communication. And like a tree, if there's a sapling that's running out of water, the tree will direct water to that sapling's roots. And that's all sort of Melvin Sheldrake's work. And I think we are, we kind of, that's why I think it's really amazing when we have a big response to something from nature. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is great. This is fab. I love it. I love it particularly because there is an element of nervousness with me about talking about the body, and yet I feel very relaxed talking to you about it.
Good.
That's
Good.
great.
Yeah.
Before we wind down,
Yeah.
is it okay to take a little bit of time to add if there's anything that we missed? Although it may be, if you're up for it, we could have like another dipping in. But I just wondered whether or not we could leave our lovely listeners with some names and all sort of concepts. Like you mentioned Gabor Mate. I think you mentioned Peter Levine, and The Body Keeps the Score. But is there any others that we can sort of recommend, suggest?
I think there's lots of things out there. But I think in particular things that you can look up, for example, look up online, in terms of techniques, you could look up box breathing techniques.
Box breathing techniques.
Box breathing, yeah, which will teach you how to regulate your breathing. And you can, we've done that meditation, the oxytocin meditation, which is just keeping your hands still on the heart center. But there's also a meditation called the butterfly hug, which regulates your brain. That's working with both sides of your brain. And it's actually a trauma regulation support, but it's really good. And as long as you're working with both sides of your body, you can either do the butterfly hug like this, or you can do gorilla beats. If a butterfly isn't your thing, you can do gorilla beats. So which a lot of people like to do as well. Or you can just put your hands on stimulate your thighs. Across. Working with both sides of your body. So those kind of things are really helpful. There's Thich Nhat Hanh. I have to go into my dyslexic brain to spell that. But Thich Nhat Hanh is really brilliant in terms of really simplifying concepts, sort of spiritual concepts, and things like communication, and also how to be with the earth. I really love Thich Nhat Hanh's work, and I too have had panic attacks, and his meditation was the first thing that really helped me with that. And it was basically, his meditation is so simple, but it's basically, I am breathing in, and you breathe in, and I am breathing out, and I am breathing in, and I am breathing out, and that's the meditation. And it's so fantastic because it's so simple, but it really affects all of your body. And if you're doing it when you're walking, so you're actually moving and feeling your feet on the earth at the same time, it's even more powerful. I really love that. So that's Thich Nhat Hanh, and he's spelled Thich Nhat and then Han. And he was, I think he's only just died actually. He's got lots of lovely books written, and they're the books that you can really, you don't need to be a therapist, you don't need to be, they're really, really lovely writings. And he's got books on like love, communication, anger, and he does a walking meditation, and he's like, just when you're walking, if you're doing it really mindfully, really feeling your feet on the floor, and remember that you're walking on the bones of your ancestors, and that helps you to connect with with your environment on a much, much deeper level.
Maybe, although hope I'm not being out of order here or asking too much, but I just wonder whether or not we could have one sort of episode session where we just do lots of these exercises for people. Like one that I particularly love and do a lot in the car is vooing, where I just do say the word voo and let it really vibrate.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's using the voice. That's
feel like a certain amount of calmness from that.
Well, that's where chanting came in. And then you can get into the realms of vibration, and then you can get into the realms of, each note that you choose, like, with all the chakra notes. I don't know if you know anything about the body system and the chakras.
Not a lot.
Well, basically, the notes that we hear, so the lower notes, like on a piano, the low notes will resonate with your body tissues that are lower in your body, and sometimes linked with depression and things like that. And the higher notes are more related to like your consciousness, your brain. And so when you're actually in some spiritual kind of practices, there's chanting that's done, and you're omming, and the om is resonating with a certain vibration in your heart vibration, or it's not I'm not expert in that field at all, but I did a lot of singing and chanting when I was wanting to, really help myself get connected to my body. And it's been really shown, hasn't it, that choirs are really, really helpful for, feeling good and feeling happier. Singing together and singing in the shower, anything, like you say, what do you call it?
Vooing,
not vomiting. Vooing.
It's saying the word voo.
Voo.
Yeah.
So you can do that doing that in your car. Who sings it? How many people sing in their car when they wouldn't necessarily sing outside their car? It's because it's a container. It's a safe container, isn't it? Like a little womb.
I read an article recently, like literally yesterday, that young people were now going in groups and screaming, which we might have called primal screaming at one point. I've always thought this is a great idea, that rather than be aggressive or towards anyone, why don't you go out into nature and just let it all out?
Yeah, doing it at the sea or something like that. If you've got water near, even better. Yeah.
Louise, thank you so much for taking the time. Really nice. I felt like we've covered loads and loads of stuff.